the best place to invest is a great growing business. The issue is that you need to be careful how much you're paying. So every business has a value, and we want to be buying things for well below that value. Buying great businesses at 80 times earnings typically is not going to be a great way to get rich. Capitalism is very brutal. It's competitive. It's a dog-eat-dog world. Most businesses are not going to be around, forget even making a lot of money or not making money. They're not even going to be around 2 or 3 decades after they are formed. Most startups will disappear in 5 or 10 years, but even the ones that make it past 10 years, very few will make it past 20 or 30 years. So there's a very small sliver of businesses that survive for several decades and thrive for several decades. So they have to have some kind of a moat, which is enduring and durable. Enduring and durable moats are very rare in capitalism. They almost happen by accident, or almost the entrepreneur. Most entrepreneurs who will start off saying, I want to create a durable moat, are going to fail. They're very difficult to create. So if you look at a business like American Express, Visa, MasterCard, the payment system, obviously payment is going through a lot of change, but those businesses have been very resilient, producing great returns on capital for a very long period of time, especially after Visa and MasterCard went public and became independent entities. They've done quite well. But most businesses overall are not going to be in this favored space of durable moats. So we're not so much looking for growth. We want growth, but we want durability of that growth. So, for example, if you look at a business like Costco, it's almost bulletproof. It's not going anywhere. Amazon, almost bulletproof, not going anywhere. These are very durable businesses. So what we're looking for is strong durability with strong growth. And that becomes a really, really narrow sliver of capitalism. And then on top of that, we want a great price. So the cherry on the cake is you want great growth, you want great durability, and you want a great price. And when all these 7 moons line up, that's when you can make an investment. So you can't do that very often. I mean, in a year, if I find a couple of things, I think I'm doing pretty well.
You invest into 1 to 3 bets a year. How big is your top of funnel?
Well, I think that would be a little bit difficult question to answer because I look at hundreds and hundreds of businesses every year, but most of them I probably spend less than maybe 5 minutes on, maybe 2-3 minutes on. I spend very little time because it becomes very obvious very quickly that there's no moat here, or there's no growth here, or there's no durability here. So, or a big reason to get rid of companies quickly is I don't understand them. They're outside my circle of competence. So if I look at anything in pharmaceuticals, it's gone before you can blink your eyes. Anything in healthcare, I think US healthcare does not operate with market forces. US health insurance companies don't operate with market forces. So I'm not interested in those kinds of businesses. So large swaths of businesses just go away because they're just not in the sweet spot of what I would understand. I look at a large number of businesses every year, but I spend most of my time on very few businesses. First of all, one of the things that Buffett says is unlike baseball, in investing there are no call strikes. And so what that means is that if Amazon crosses my desk at $10 a share, maybe 18 years ago or 20 years ago, and I'm too dense to figure it out and I let it go, I don't pay a penalty for that. What I pay a penalty for is if I make an investment in pets.com and it doesn't work. So that's where you pay the penalty, is if you actually make the bet, not when you take a pass. So we can be somewhat sloppy in what we select versus don't select, especially in terms of letting go some great businesses. That happens a lot with me. I'm sure there are lots and lots of businesses I look at which are very awesome businesses, but I cannot see it. So what I'm looking for is something really quickly that grabs my attention. Maybe I would say maybe a couple of decades ago, I saw that in Value Line, one of the cross sections of list of stocks they have is stocks with the lowest PEs. So they follow 1,700 stocks. They list like 40, 50 stocks that have the lowest PEs. And usually I scan those lists very quickly every week. And they don't change that much week to week, but that most businesses are there with PEs of 2 and 3 and 4 for very good reasons. They don't make sense. But I remember I saw about 20 years ago that there were 2 funeral services companies that were sitting at a PE of 2. I thought in my head that funeral services is a very stable business. It's recurring revenue in the sense that we know that a certain number of people will die every year in the United States. We don't know who's going to die, but we know how many are going to die. And the other thing is that it's a protected business. 21-year-olds don't go into the business world saying, I'm going to open a funeral services business. And it also is tradition bound. So when you're looking to have your last rites done, you're looking for a place that has been around for a while. And you're also looking for the service to be done properly. So you don't go shopping for the low bid. Okay, so you don't when your Uncle Steve has died, you don't call 6 places and get the lowest price and then say, okay, that's where we're going to have the service. But you're generally going to not want to do those kinds of things. So these businesses generally have good margins. They don't face much competition. And what had happened in the US a while back, maybe about 25, 30 years ago, was there had been a massive roll-up in the funeral services industry. So they were all mom and pops all over the world, all over the place. And these 2 or 3 large companies came in and they bought them all. They kept the same names and everything, but they were owned by, these 2 or 3 players. And these players got over leveraged, and then the music stopped, and then their stocks went into tailspins. And that's when I was looking at them. So they had a lot of leverage, a lot of debt, but on a pure kind of free cash flow basis, they were sitting at 2 times earnings. So I looked at, I said, okay, there is a lot of debt. Can the debt be managed? So I got intrigued because the PE was showing 2, and it said funeral services, right? So that was the trigger to take further, right? And eventually I made the investment and it worked really well. So there are different triggers. Another time, I think in 2012, I was looking at the auto industry, and I first looked at GM because a couple of guys had bought it, and I was trying to understand why they would buy such a crappy business. And I was then looking at Fiat Chrysler, and I noticed that their revenues were 140 billion, and the market cap was 5 billion. So they were trading at 3%. 4% of revenue. And there were a number of things that had happened in the auto business in 2009 after the financial crisis, which actually made the business really good because they got rid of a lot of the nonsense. So that was another where the valuation was so cheap, and a lot of the things that people hated about the business had actually changed. So basically there are some things we understand, and based on this understanding, we can look at businesses, and sometimes in our life experience, when we look at a business, we might say, oh, I see something here and I should look at it. But I've also missed so many. To give you an example, every time I go into a Starbucks, I marvel at the incredible business it is. So when they open a Starbucks store, it takes them 18 to 24 months to get all their money back. Okay, so you open a store, and outside the US, they get it back in a year. Okay, so the international Starbucks, and the other thing that I've known for a long time, and they did this in New York City, was you have a Starbucks in a particular intersection, You open another one diagonal from that intersection, no change in the store sales of the original one. You open a third one, there's still no change. So the demand for a Starbucks coffee relates to the convenience, so we don't even know where that endpoint is. And you take milk and coffee and whatever, and you're charging $4 or $5 for it. Most of it is carried out. They're not even in the store. They're not using your facilities, not using your Wi-Fi. So a few people are in the store, kind of gives the atmosphere. But just, it's an incredible business. Okay. And I always looked at it, always thought it was expensive, never bought it, and it just keeps going, And I've been, a big fan of Chipotle for a long time. I mean, I think probably 20 years I've been a customer of Chipotle, right? And I knew 20 years ago it was a great business. And again, just watching, raising my navel instead of doing something. And what an incredible business. I think what, like Munger says, we are old too soon and wise too late. What is gradually sinking in is a willingness to pay up. And the other thing that is sinking in which is more important, is a willingness to hold. So it is not, the two big mistakes that I have made aren't, one is very obvious, passing on a number of great businesses because they looked optically overpriced. Okay, in the end, it turned out they were not overpriced, but when you looked at them, they looked expensive. It's just that they were such awesome businesses that you could have paid 30, 40 times earnings and still done really well on them. And the second more difficult thing is that you buy something that's an incredible business. Maybe it's available at 10 times earnings, and it's worth 20, 30 times earnings. And it does well, it gets to 20, 30 times earnings, and you sell it. And it keeps going. And that's the other thing. So those are the two big mistakes, is being too much of a cheapskate, not paying up, and being too much of a cheapskate and not willing to hold. And I'm hoping to get better at both of those. So there's still a lot of learning and growth for me to do.